What's up, guys? Tyler at RC Madness. Just wanted to do a quick comparison video for you guys. I got the B64 and the B74 sitting in front of me. Just wanted to run through some of the differences on them, just so you guys have a better understanding of maybe which option to buy, maybe a used B64 or a brand new B74, just so you guys can see what's different, see if it's worth it for you, that's all. So I'm gonna pull the bodies off and we can check them out. All right, so here I got a B64. Obviously it's a used one. I don't have a new one anymore because they've been out for a while, and now they are discontinued now, so keep that in mind. And then we have the B74 over here. Shout out to Dave on the body, did killer splatter job for me, I love him. Anyway, so I'm just gonna run you through the car real quick so you guys can see what the difference is, see what option is good for you. Electronics wise, they can take the same electronics, so I'm not gonna get into that. Just gonna stay just on the chassis mechanically. And the 64 does have some upgrades on it, so I'll mention those as I go. I'm gonna start out. Shocks are not that much different between the two. The 74 does use different length shock bodies and shock shafts, but other than that, the shocks are the same. This one's got JC aluminum caps on it, which would fit on this car as well. But shock-wise, pretty similar. The hubs, they both come with the aluminum caster blocks. Different degrees, I believe, but they can be changed. I don't think this one's, I think they came with 10s. Or 8s or 10s, I'm not sure. There were 7 and 10, I think, for this car. I think this one's got 9s on it. Don't quote me on that. But both of them come with aluminum ones. Turnbuckles are the same for the cars, stock for stock. This one's got JC titanium ones on there. Turnbuckles, I believe, are a different length on this car, so I'm not 100% sure if they'll fit back and forth, but I'm sure you could adjust them to make it fit. The shock towers are different front and rear. They're lower and smaller on the 74. The 64 had a bit of a problem. These ears came out like this, and if you clip something on the top of your shock, it would snap the ear off. Obviously, if you hit something, things are gonna break. But they did break these a little more often than, say, like the X-Ray or Schumacher, stuff like that. The 74, they shortened the tower, brought the ears in, and we got these metal bulkheads on here now, which is a big upgrade. Metal bulkhead, smaller tower. It's looking, I don't know, you're gonna be hard pressed to break this front tower over this one. Moving back, the steering rack comes aluminum on the 74, where it was an upgrade on the 64. This one has an Exotech one on it. 74 comes with the black Associated one in the box, which is nice because the plastic one did pretty much always break on the 64. I don't know why. It was a pretty thick piece of plastic, but it still snapped. The front used a front brace to 2 aluminum blocks in the 64. The 74 uses a couple carbon pieces up here to tie the steering together, and then it has these carbon fiber spines that run down the center of the chassis instead of having a chassis brace. Whether this is good or bad, I'm not really sure. I think it looks a lot cleaner and makes it look cooler with all the carbon. That's all I'm going off of. And you can remove the carbon to make the car more flexible. I'd say probably on dirt, you probably want a more flexible car. Here on the turf and carpet, we keep them stiff, so I'm gonna leave the carbon in my car. But that being said, it does make it easier to work on the front drive shaft and take the slipper out. The problem with this one was, to take the slipper out, you had to pull it out. It was a little tricky because the drive shaft does have a little groove here to follow, but it still was a little tricky to pull the diff out with this center brace on there. And to work on the steering was a little bit harder. It's not really a big deal, just a little bit of a complaint from the mechanic, that's all. But it did hold up fine, no breaking, but this does look prettier with all the carbon. I'm not gonna lie, carbon looks cool to me. Servo mounts are pretty similar. Floating mount, nothing really different there. Mounted on the same side, pretty much the same spot. Receivers are mounted same spot. The center diff or slipper location is a little bit lower, and the mounts are black instead of blue now. The 64 came with a cover, and this one is just open. Not really complained or anything, just mentioning it. The cover is actually kind of nice because you can run the wiring over like this. Whereas this one, you got to make sure you run it either this way or around some way so it doesn't get caught in the gear. Just something to keep in mind. I just run mine like this. Doesn't seem to be an issue. The motor mounts are pretty similar. I think this one might be a hair easier to slide the motor in and out, but they both kind of use that same track system with 2 screws. Both are pretty easy to work with there, not a big deal. The slipper, they changed the slipper nut, and this one's in the opposite direction. I never really had a problem with the slipper in the 64. That one seemed to work fine. This one, they just give you a little bit bigger of a nut, it looks like, and that's pretty much it. They both worked quite well, no complaints there. I'd say the next big thing is the 74 uses all CVD drive shafts, so where the 64 had dog bone drive shafts. CVDs are just nicer because they don't have any play back and forth because they're locked into that pin and cylinder and then bolted onto the pinion. So if you see, no play, and then a 64, you get a lot of play. This just wears out the drive shafts and the outdrive's a little bit faster. But there is some fixes to this. We did put some, a little bit of fuel tubing or O-rings in the outdrives to tighten up the drive shafts. But the CVDs are nicer in the 74. That is I think a major difference. I prefer all CVDs in all my cars. Not a huge dog bone fan because they tend to pop out and fling out on the track, and then you're that guy out there looking for your dog bone on the track. But the 74, I believe, had, it's got CVDs front and rear. It was just the centers that were dog bones, which they made CVDs on this car. And while we're talking about the center shafts, I'm really glad that the 64 had this snap ring and this outdrive that came out. It was a kind of an odd setup. The snap ring kept the dog bone into the rear end. The problem I have with that is if you hit something hard enough or twist it the wrong way, the snap ring would pop off and then your dog bone would fall out and it would be all wiggly and loose in there. And those snap rings were a bit of a pain to put on. I've had to put a lot on for a few of my customers, and I'm not a fan. I didn't care for that at all. This car, I was so happy to see that they put a CVD with a coupler over it, or a cover, like their 8th scale cars. That made it so much better. You can just loosen the set screw, take the drive shaft out, put it back in, not have to fiddle with that little snap ring that doesn't like to go on, especially in the front where you have to take all this cover off in order to get that snap ring in. Sorry, a little bit of a rant about the snap ring. Did not like it. Anyway, moving on. The battery strap setup is different. This one comes with the carbon one, 2 thumb screws. This comes with the plastic one and a screw here, and it pivots out. I will give it to the 64. It was easier to take the battery in and out on this one, mostly because I need a tool to do this, but I could switch this to thumb screws and make it a little easier. This one, you just loosened it, swung it out, battery out. That was pretty easy. That was kind of cool. But the carbon does look cooler. But you could upgrade this one to carbon. So that, and I did mention that the balance wire is always covered up by this battery strap. You can't charge your battery in your car, which I know you're not supposed to, and I don't recommend it. I would take it out, put it in a bag, and charge it. Seen some cars melt down from batteries, but let's be realistic. Most of the guys are charging their batteries in their car. That's just the way it is. And this one does have a cutout here for the balance plug, so you can charge the battery in the car without having to modify the car, which is pretty nice. And then just a little bit on the back end here. Again, just the shock towers are different. It's got, all the parts are different. A-arms and the bulkheads and all that. I don't need to mention all that. Usually changes when the cars get updated to a new model. I think the quality of the parts is about the same, like plastic wise. I don't think they're just a different shape and design to match the new car. The 64 had pretty easy access diffs. The 74 does as well. The diffs in the 74 are nicer. They're a little beefier and they use less shims. I didn't really care for the diffs in the 64. They had a lot of shims on them, even on the inside and the outside, which I didn't really care for. I didn't really have a problem with them per se breaking or anything like that. It was just kind of a pain when you had to do maintenance on them when there's like 60 shims in there to take on and off all the time. But probably just over-exaggerating that a little bit. There's not actually 60 shims in there. But the four-wheel, the 74 looks like they refined it a little bit and thought about it a little bit more, which is nice. But that being said, they both come out pretty easy. They're both pretty easy to rebuild. The plastic gears do work in both. Just throwing that out there for a little fun fact if you're curious about that. Just lighten it up for four-wheel drive. The 74 comes with the aluminum cross pin in the diffs. The 64 was all steel, but you could upgrade to aluminum. That's pretty much it between them. Wheelbase, let's see if I can line up wheel nut. Looks like the back here, the 64 is a hair longer. Now this could be due to this setup, so I'm not gonna say for sure. But it appears to be pretty set up stock. I know for a fact this one is stock, but that being said, the wheelbase is a little bit shorter on this car, which usually makes it handle a bit better here on the turf. But like I said, this one could be a little off. It could have been because it's been modified. Yeah, that's just a quick comparison between a 64 and a 74. The chassis underneath pretty similar. I just wanted to show you guys that, so I had a customer ask me the other day, what's the difference? Is it worth it? I think it's worth it to get the 74. I think it handles a lot better than the 64 did. But there are definitely a lot of deals out there on the 64 used if you want to just get into four-wheel and give it a try. If you've been in four-wheel or been racing two-wheel and want to try four-wheel, just get a 74. It handles way better, at least here on the turf. I can't say for dirt or anything like that. Dirt, the 64 may be the better car. I'm just speaking about turf. I would get the 74 all day. I actually enjoy driving this car a lot better than the 64. Is it the best four-wheel drive? That's a whole nother video. Everybody's got an opinion about that. I personally like Associated, but I'm not gonna get too into that. Let me know if you guys want to see that video. We can I can pull some buddies in. We can have a talk about that one. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Check out the B74 build videos. We're gonna have a running video coming out with that. Let me know what else you guys want to see for videos, and stay tuned for the next one.